Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening to you. Welcome to this CompTIA Security Plus Mastery course. This training is designed for the 701 version of the exam. What that means is that you are going to learn the greatest and the latest technologies in cybersecurity. So, a few things about this class. This is not going to be your typical security plus training where somebody is reading some kind of a script to you or some kind of a book to you. No. My goal in this class is to not only help you pass that certification, but also make sure you understand what cybersecurity is all about. Let's get started. Welcome back. Now, this training is divided into the 5 domains that you will find in the CompTIA Security Plus 701 version of the exam. And I've covered this training in their domains to help a little bit easier for the people to follow along, but also make sure that we've covered everything that you need to know for you to be able to pass that exam. So we're going to kind of start with the domain 1, which is the general security concepts. And this is where we get to introduce to you all the core security technologies and terminologies that you need to understand for this exam. I like to think that this is the most important kind of a domain of them all. I'm not saying the other ones are not important, but what I'm saying is that for the people, the new people that are getting started in cybersecurity, this is the most important of them all because you get to learn the core foundation of cybersecurity. And what you learn in this domain is what you build on top of in the rest of the training, but also in the other training that you're going to take in your cybersecurity journey. So here is the kind of the course roadmap for the first part of domain 1. What we're going to do is introduce you to security principles, right? Terminologies, terms, concepts, things that you absolutely need to understand. So first thing we're going to talk about is this right here. Now, this is not part of, the exam. I put this here because I wish every time I started like a security training, somebody would have just tell me this, right? So what the heck is this? Well, this is the idea of how you should approach security. Oftentimes, we want to just jump in and start securing things. We think that security is about using the shiny tools and implementing the firewalls and doing all of these kind of things without really taking a step back, look at the big picture. So I'm going to start the training by giving you the big pictures of knowing where your valuable data is, not just any data, valuable data. It's important for you to know that because the company will pay you. The company will hire you because they want you to, secure them. And oftentimes, security doesn't make a company money at all. Oftentimes, actually, security it's something that slows business down, right? If they can not pay for security, they will love to do that. So what you need to do is to make security where it will allow the business to do what the business does best. I often tell people that security is the enabler, right? We are the enabler. We allow the business to do what the business does without any interruption. And that's why I started the training with this by telling you once you get hired at the company, you need to know the data that you're working with and specifically find the most important data of them all, then focus your security on that data because the bad guys are coming for that data. And if you can keep that data secure, your company will love you for it. So it's not part of the class, but not part of the class. It's not part of Security Plus, but it's how I'm going to start this class. Then I want to talk about the cybersecurity NIST framework, specifically the second version of this framework. In 2023, I'm recording this in 2024, by the way. 2023, they drafted the framework, but now the framework is fully out and then you can use it. They introduced governance to this framework. And I think that was very important for them to do that because oftentimes security has been seen as a technical problem, but now that mindset is shifting. right? Where governance, where we need the people who have skin in the game, right? The leaders of the business to come in and give us that strategic leadership that they should be providing, give us the funding. Many times when you ask for money, for security money, they don't give it to you, right? And a lot of security people, we also have the behavior of asking money so that we can comply with something, which is also not good because compliance is not security. We'll get there. But the cybersecurity framework makes it easier for you to understand security. It goes in and talk about like I think it's about five, six domains where it starts with identifying what you have and try to protect it and monitor it and so on and so forth. So governance was introduced into this second version, and it's making security a business problem now instead of looking at security as a technical problem. Then we will dive into the concepts, the terminologies that you are going to see on that exam, starting with the cornerstone of cybersecurity, and that is the CIA, confidentiality, integrity, availability. Right? Often students, when I'm teaching this live, they're like, "Oh, is that the Central Intelligence Agency, right? The three-letter agency in the US?" I'm like, "No, it's not." Right? This is the confidentiality, integrity, availability. It's the cornerstone of cybersecurity, right? This is what cybersecurity is built on top of. So we're going to talk about this, but I will take a different approach on this. I will talk about this from a practical perspective. For example, if you're Amazon, right, you are like an online retailer. Well, which one of the CIA should you focus on? Which one should you put more resource towards? That's kind of a spoiler alert. Amazon will probably focus on the availability because they don't have a physical store. They want that website to be available when these people want to purchase things from their website. And let's say you're a central intelligence agency, you're one of the agencies, confidentiality will be absolutely something you focus on. So I'm going to talk about this from a practical perspective, not just what they stand for, but in what industry should they use this. Then we're going to talk about a few other definitions: threat, what is a threat, a vulnerability, a risk. Talk about non-repudiation, authentication, kind of the terms that you need to understand for the rest of this training, but also for your career as well. Because as you communicate with other professionals, these are some of the things that they assume that you know. We will talk about IEEE or I quadruple A, depending on who you ask, the identification, authentication, authorization, and accounting. Very important for you to understand this uh, in security. Then we'll talk about gap analysis, right? Look, you got to know how risky your environment is. You got to perform those gap analysis, those gap assessment for you to understand. This right here, it's a new concept that was introduced into the 701 version of the exam. So I don't think you will see, a lot of questions on the exam about this specifically one, but it's important for us to kind of perform a gap analysis. And then we're going to finish this lesson by talking about one of my favorite topic, especially now, that's known as a zero trust, right? Zero trust architecture. We'll talk about this from a different perspective than what I have seen other people kind of telling you what this is. Yes, you're going to know what zero trust is. And yes, by the way, yes, there are going to be a lot of questions on that exam about zero trust. So please do pay attention to zero trust once we get there and start talking about it. But I'm going to let you hear from John Kindervag, the creator of Zero Trust. I'm going to let you hear from him telling you what Zero Trust is in his own words. And if want to dig a little bit deeper, you follow up with him and you watch the rest of that presentation as he dig a little bit deeper. But just talking about zero trust itself, it's a little bit boring. One of the things that you're gonna see over throughout these courses, I will kind of relay the information to a real world example so that I can help you so that the information can stick with you. I kind of like that kind of stuff. So we're going to talk about zero trust from a Google perspective. Google implemented what they normally call Beyond Corp. They did that after what was known as Operation Aurora, or after getting attacked back in 2009, going to 2010-ish. And then they implemented zero trust without knowing what they were, without knowing really, it was zero trust. So we're going to take a look at that as a case study and try to see what we can learn from that. And then President Biden recently introduced a few directives. He signed a bunch of things, executive orders, requiring all the government agencies to adopt zero trust. So as you can see, zero trust is here and is here to stay. Then I'm going to talk about some of the things that you're going to see on that exam. The control plan, the data plan, the monitoring plan. These are specific terminologies are called out on the exam, so you need to know them. Then I'm going to finish this particular section by talking about the moment of truth, by taking some time and tell you the hard truth about cybersecurity. That's not going to be on that exam. This is just me kind of mentoring you, telling you that security does not make a company money. Oftentimes, security, it's like an expense to these people. So therefore, you need to understand how to present security to them. And I'm gonna kind of share a light of the revolution of security, like where are we going? Then finish this by talking about your cybersecurity career, like what should you focus on? I put all this stuff at the beginning because I know most people tend maybe to just not watch the other stuff, or maybe by the time they get there, they're really tired. So again, this is here at the beginning so that you can understand as much as you can. With that, let's go ahead and jump right in and take a look at the rest of the content. Now, before we go on and talk about the cybersecurity framework and the rest of this course, there are 4 fundamental questions. I call these core questions that you need to keep in mind. If you have a job already in cybersecurity, you should start asking yourself these questions. And if you don't have a job, I want you to ask yourself these questions once you get hired. And the first one is, what is your critical data? You got to know what's critical to your organization. So you can only do so much. And then you don't want to focus your resources and all the hard work on the wrong thing. And the best way to secure the organization is by knowing what's important to them, what's critical to them. And one way of you knowing what's critical to them is knowing how they make money. See, I'm not trying to turn you into some kind of a business executives who know the finances of the organization. No. I want you to understand, how do the company makes money? What resources do they use to make money? What websites, what database, what application they use to make money? And then focus your security on that. The second question is where that data is located. Is it in the cloud? Is it in some kind of a server in some kind of a location building somewhere? You need to know where that data is located, because it's going to help you to know how to secure that physically, because we are going to talk about physical security. So kind of keep the bad guys to lay their hands on that data based on where it's located. Third question is, who has access to that? I'm hoping you're writing these questions down, because that's the whole purpose of these questions being here. It's for you to write them down and then be coming back to these as you learn, as you advance your career in cybersecurity. So the third question is, who has access to that data? See, often people get promoted in industries and then we don't remove their access. And a company get hacked. Now, or that user who got promoted to get hacked, their account gets hacked, and now the attacker has access to all these other things that they should not be having access to in the first place. Number 4 is, who should have access to it? See, once you know who has access to it, you need to ask, okay, should they have access to this critical data? Keep these 4 questions in mind as we go on and talk about the rest of this course. Now, back to the cybersecurity framework. So why is this important? As a business, if you are trying to secure yourself, the cybersecurity framework is the best way to start. And this framework starts by talking about the first one, which is identification. Identify. If you're going to go in and secure yourself, you have to identify what you have. Going back to that critical question of know your critical data. So identification is important. You are not going to secure the things you don't know they exist, for the defenders out there. But the same question applied to, or the same concept applied to the attackers as well. They are now going to attack that which they don't know it exists in the first place. So identification is very important. Identify what you have. Identify those critical hardware, those critical software that your company depend on, and then start your security from there. And this is really not for me, because often people are like, oh, did you just came up with that? No. This is not for me. There are a lot of resources that back this up, that identification is one of those things that we in cybersecurity tend to skip, but is the most important thing of them all. And two things to back this up, including the CIS. I will include the links to this in the description. So if you look at the bottom of where you're watching this video from, you should find the links to all these resources. So when we take a look at the CIS, this is the Center for Internet Security. They have a top 18. They used to call this a top 20, but they recently changed this to top 18. When we look at this, which is very important in cybersecurity, by the way, control number 1 and control number 2 says inventory of your hardware, inventory of your software. And these are the critical controls, which means if you do these, you will win. So the first 1 and 2, they're saying, hey, you got to inventory your hardware, but you also got to inventory of your software, which basically goes back to that idea of identification. You are now going to secure that which you don't know it exists, and you're now going to attack that which you don't know it exists in the first place. And another thing that I want to kind of share with you is a talk that was given by Rob Joyce. He's the leader of the NSA Tau group, which is like the elite hacking group in the US. Right now, I think he's some kind of an executive, some kind of a director somewhere of the NSA, I believe now. But at the time when he gave out this talk, he was like in charge of the group. And here's what he said. And I want you to watch this as a part of your resources and kind of getting to know more stuff. And here's what he said.
If you really want to protect your network, you really have to know your network. You have to know the devices, the security technologies, and the things inside it. So
that's it. Right? He said, if you really want to protect your network, know thy network. You're not going to secure the things you don't know. And them, the attackers, they also try to go in there and know the network before they can attack anything on that network. So that's step 1. Step 1 or phase 1 is identify what's critical to your organization, specifically in terms of hardware and software. And then once you know what's important to you, once you know your assets, you have to protect it, right? The protection, this is where you go in, you put in things like firewalls in place. We'll be talking about firewalls. If you don't know what that is, you put things like access control list in place, right? You're trying to go in there and do the protection. Cybersecurity people, we love this. Why? Because that's our mindset. Our mindset is protect, 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 protect. But I want you to understand, you're not going to be protecting what you don't know you have in the first place. But protection is really important, and that's the second phase. The third phase is detection. See, often people think that, well, I'm going to protect the network and making sure that the bad guys doesn't get in. But I have bad news for you. Your protection will fail you, right? Your protection will fail you. There's no doubt. And if the attacker really wants to get to you, they will get to you. We have a group of attackers known as APT. I'll be teaching you this in a little sections. APT, Advanced Persistence Threat, right? If this group of attacker is after you, there's little you can do. You can slow them down, but eventually they will get in. So here is the issue though. Once the attacker gets into your environment, well, we don't want them to be in there for like 60 days. For months, right? We don't want them to be in there for months. We want to be able to detect them as soon as we can. And that's where this saying from a lot of the SANS instructors comes back in and says, prevention is ideal, but detection is a must. Oftentimes, attackers will get into your environment, spend months in there without us noticing that they're in our environment. We want to make sure we kind of reverse that where, okay, well, they will get in, but let's identify them. Let's detect them as soon as we can. Right. So right here in the detection, that's where we use things like intrusion prevention systems, right? IPS, intrusion detection systems, right? And some other kind of technologies to help us detect bad things as they happen, right? So phase number 4 here, it's a response. Once we detect that the bad guys are here, we got to respond. This is where we go in and we try to fix the issue. This is where we go in and we try to sort of stop the bleed, if you will. We are going in and we're responding to the incident. Step number 5 is recovery. If the attacker managed to damage anything, this is where we recover from the damage. We restore the system from the backups. We restore the system for images, you name it. We do all to try to recover and get back up and running as soon as we can. Now, the cybersecurity framework version 1 had just these 3, which, by the way, version 1 came out in 2014. All right, 2014 is when the NIST came out with the version 1. Version 1.1 came out in 2018. And then now in 2023, they just recently released the draft for version 2.0. And what they introduced in version 2.0 is the governance. So what is this governance? Governance is when the organization leadership goes in and provide the leadership that they should be providing. So they give us funding, make sure that we're funded as a cybersecurity program. They give us the direction, like where are we going? So they provided that strategic leadership for the cybersecurity department. They help us with the policies. Right? Remember, policy is just a document that tells us, hey, these are the things that we should be focusing on, that give us guidance, if you will, and so on and so forth. So this is very critical, because now cybersecurity is it's not a technical problem anymore. It's a business problem. And we've seen that with the like of the government suing a SolarWinds, something that I'm going to be talking about in a later on. Here, where they're holding the leadership of a SolarWinds accountable for the attack that happened in 2020. The CIA triad. What is it and why should you care? Again, CIA has nothing to do with the Central Intelligence Agency. This is the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Triad implies 3. If you were to Google this right now, you will see this CIA triad presented as a triangle, as a 3-legged stool, as a 3-pillar. What that means is that all of these 3 things have to be present for something to even be considered being secure. So in this certification, this Security Plus certification, it doesn't really go in and say domain 1 CIA, domain 2 CIA, domain 3 CIA, domain 4, domain 5 CIA. But this confidentiality, integrity, availability is one of those core foundation thing that you are going to find in all the domains. Questions that are going to come up on that exam are going to be referencing these 3 things. Although in the exam objective, it doesn't really go in and say domain 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's all CIA. So you will see this everywhere. So what is it and why should you care? Well, confidentiality, a lot of people get it. A lot of us understand it. Whenever somebody says, hey, we got to keep this thing confidential, we understand it. Besides, this is cybersecurity. Confidentiality is the one that is tied close to cybersecurity. It's all about maintaining the secrecy of something. What is that thing that we're maintaining the secrecy of? Well, this could be like protected information. We usually call this PII, where anything that identify an individual, we're gonna keep it that secure. Healthcare information, cardholder information, customer data, citizen data, trade secrets, intellectual properties. We want to keep all these confidential things secret. And the way we do that is by accomplishing a confidentiality. Keeping secret, making sure that only those that are authorized to access that which is secret are the ones that are accessing that secret information. Now, some of the things that come in mind when you think about confidentiality includes encryption. When you encrypt something, you are given a key. Unless you have that key, you won't be able to decrypt that thing. And that's really accomplishing confidentiality. That's really keeping secret. Another one that we can use, including, access control. Making sure that we're only giving people access they need, to access things, right? Not accessing things that they should not be accessing to in the first place. We do that through things like I quadruple A, something that we're going to talk about in more depth. Things like identification, authentication, authorization, and accounting. All of these things when we're going in and asking people, hey, who are you? Are you supposed to be having access to these things? We are in reality accomplishing confidentiality. Confidentiality goes beyond encryption and goes into physical security. See, when you have servers in a building, you want to make sure the bad guys cannot lay their hand on that physical server. So we're going to have things like door locks, fences, all kind of things in place physically to prevent the bad guy from laying their hands on that physical server. When we do that, we're accomplishing confidentiality. So let me show you something here. One of the way of us accomplishing confidentiality. There's a website known as a ROT 13. Again, I will put this in the resource section. When you go to ROT 13, you can literally say things like, hey, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then you can use ROT 1. Think about ROT 1 as the key. Let me put that here. Think about ROT 1 as the secret, as the key. So right now, I'm just saying ROT 1, meaning substitute this by 1. I will be coming back to this once we talk about cryptography and go deeper into encryption. But I just want to show you this in the real world so you can have kind of an idea how we usually accomplish this. So you go and you say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then you're substituting 1. That's really what ROT 1 is. The secret, the key, we're substituting 1. So we're going in and we're saying, hey, this is A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Basically, we're substituting 1. So this is an encrypted messages, right? This is right here. It's an encrypted message right here. And then this right here, it's what we call a clear text, which is an unencrypted messages. If I'm confusing right now, that's okay. We will be coming back to this in a little bit, right? So, but a clear text, it's a message that you can understand, that you can see that makes sense to you. So, for example, let's say that I go in here and delete this and says, we are going to attack. Look at this. This is an encrypted message. This is something that you can read and understand. So unless you have the key, unless you know that I use ROT 1, so you can reverse this, you won't be able to make sense of it. Let's get back to the slides here. So remember, again, remember confidentiality. We're trying to maintain a secrecy of something. We're trying to keep confidential information confidential, making sure that only the people that are authorized to accessing this thing are the ones that are accessing that particular thing. Another piece in the CIA is the I, the integrity. Integrity has to do with the modification of data. What we're trying to do with integrity, we're trying to make sure that data has not been changed, have not been altered by the unauthorized personnel, right? Keeping things original. That's really what we care about when it comes to integrity. One way of us accomplishing integrity is by using what we normally call hashing algorithms. When you go and you hash something, you are given a hexadecimal number. This includes letters and numbers and things along those lines. And then you use that one-way string, we call that a one-way string. That hexadecimal number that you were given, you use that to check integrity. You use that to check to see if things have been changed, to see if things are original. So two hashing algorithms that we have, including SHA, and the SHA have the different variations. We have SHA-0, SHA-1, SHA-2, they even have SHA-3, but SHA-2 is the most common one. We're going to talk about that in more depth. But SHA stands for Secure Hashing Algorithms. Then we have MD5, Message Digest 5. They used to have the previous version of this, and like MD4, MD3, MD2, and on and on and on. Imagine you're trying to download a software. Are you trying to download a tool that you want to use? Actually, let me go ahead and demonstrate this for you. My Linux. Imagine you're trying to download this VirtualBox. Well, one of the things that you can do, you can download it, right, by clicking on this little icon here. But the question is, how do you know what you are downloading is original? How do you know this file that you're getting has not been tampered with, that nobody have messed around with this? Well, one way that offensive security, the creator of Kali, did, they show you the sum. They show you the hash. Specifically, they're using the SHA-256, right? And then they literally give you this one-way string. We call this a checksum, right? Which is another way of saying hash. They produced this to tell you that, look, once you finish downloading this, you can verify the sum, right? If everything is identical, right? If what you get is identical to this, then you should trust this file. You should know that this file have not been tampered with, have not been changed. You should know that the integrity of this file is still intact. So let's go ahead and do that. Go ahead and just download this. I think I've already downloaded that earlier. So if I go to my download folder here, actually, let me just go ahead and from the VMs. So if I CD, so you can start looking at this. If I CD into downloads, if I can spell downloads right, I CD into downloads. Now I am in the download directory. If I do LS means, hey, list what's in here. Show me what's in here. I can see that the Kali is in here. So if I say SHA 256 sum, if I can be typing, SHA 256 sum, and then just point it to that where I say Kali, then I can hit tab to kind of finish the whole thing. If I hit enter right now, it's gonna go ahead and try to generate the hash. Right? If the hash matches with what they have here, then now I can trust this file. Right? I can know that this is original, have not been tampered with it. So we use hashing. We use hashes to be able to verify integrity of something. There we go. It came back. So as we can see here, after running, let's verify just the last four here, 17D1F. Let's go back to the website, 17D1F. Bingo, right? It's original, have not been tampered with. That means now I can go ahead and then use this. I can go ahead and just do whatever I wish with this. I can trust it. Nobody have tampered with this. If somebody could have tampered with this, it will look completely different. The thing about hashes is that even if you change one value, the whole thing will look different. So let's go to Google and let's bring up something like MD5 hash online, right? So you can kind of get to see this in action. Now, that's not a good example. Let me just bring up something that looks pretty good. There you go. This is pretty good, right? This is pretty good because I want to make sure you can see things as I'm changing them on the fly. So imagine I'm trying to generate a hash for this email, and the email says, hello, world, right? This is the message, and this is the hash. Specifically, I'm using MD5. It doesn't matter. The same concept apply if you're using things like SHA-1, SHA-256, or any one of the thousands of different hashing algorithms that they have. So hello world brings me this. If I were to go ahead and send you this with this, after you ran this, similar to what we did with Kali, you generated this checksum. If it produced the same thing as you're looking at here, then you can trust is hello world. But if someone on the way, if the message on the way coming to you, someone went in and make some changes to it, even if they add a dot, the entire hash will look different. Keep an eye on that. So whatever they do, the whole hash changes, right? Even if they add a little something, even if they add whatever they add to the original message, the whole hash will look completely different, right? That's why hashing are used to verify integrity. It's because when you make any change, the hash will tell you, look, you should not trust this message. It have been tampered with. It's not original. Right? Somebody have tampered with this message. Now, back to the slides here. Let's get back to this. Another one we have is availability. Availability, it's all about making sure that things are accessible when needed by those who need it. Those that are supposed to be accessing the data, is it available to them? I like to say that availability is the enemy of security. Because check this out. If we didn't need to make things available, then we're secure. If something is not available, that means even the attacker can't access it. And if they can't access it, that means they can't hack it. So the issue, though, with security is that we have to make things available That's where the trade-off begins of making sure that, okay, these things are available, therefore let's make sure they're available in a secure way manner. So what are some of the ways that we ensure availability, like making sure things are available to those that are supposed to be accessing those things? Well, we can have things like redundancy. Redundancy is when you use two of something instead of using one. Right? For example, RAID. Absolutely, RAID comes in mind. RAID, this is a redundant area of independent disks. This is where we go in, we use it two hard drives instead of using one. The idea is that if one hard drive fails, the other one is available. The other one can, you kind of are keeping things going. Another thing that we make sure with availability is making sure that we can withstand a fault. Part of that fault tolerance, keeping things running even if there's a fault, even if there's something that wants to shut down, we're keeping things running. Having like a power redundancy, like UPS, this is uninterruptible power supply. I know the people in the US are like, is that the United Postal Service? No, it's not. It's not. This is the uninterruptible power supply, like having a backup generators. All these things are fantastic to ensure availability, to make sure that things are available when they are needed. Most people are like, okay, Francois, we got it, right? We understand that confidentiality, integrity, availability, it's super important. And that we got to keep this in mind as we take the exam. But even after we got hired, as we're spinning up the new application, as we're setting up the new system, we got to keep confidentiality, integrity, availability in mind. Absolutely correct. But really good cybersecurity professionals take this one step further. They focus on all of three. They understand that it's really important that they maintain all these three, but they try to put them into priority order. See, if you are working for the intelligence agencies, one of the US government agencies, for example, one of the things they care about the most is confidentiality. For them, confidentiality is important than these other two things, than integrity, than availability. If your business is in a finance, imagine if you work for the bank. For them, making sure the integrity of the money is very important than anything else. All right. Again, I want you to understand me. I'm not saying you should not do the other two. I'm saying that depending on the company that you're in, you might prioritize one over the other. Often, people that are in charge of securing the industry, they were focusing on the resources on the wrong thing, right? Not necessarily the wrong thing, more like not the right thing. So they might have like something that looks like this, where they have the confidentiality here, they have the integrity here, and they have the availability here. So if you are in the intelligence agencies, if you work for one of them, you want to focus all your resources, the budget on the confidentiality. That's the thing that that organization care about more than anything. But if you're a bank, you want to maybe put more money, more resources against the integrity. See, people really don't want their money to keep changing, right? They don't want people modifying the money as the money is in the bank, right? So as a financial institution, you want to focus on that. But if you're Amazon.com, if you are on an e-commerce website, you want to focus your resources on things like availability, right? Put more emphasis on the availability. There was this guy who got hired. He was one of the CISO. When you're a CISO, you are at the top of cybersecurity, meaning you're in charge of the cybersecurity department. This guy got hired, and they gave him $20 million to secure the enterprise. And guess what? 3 years later, the security did not get improved. And then the CEO of the organization was concerned, be like, hey, I just spent $20 million on securing this organization. Why are we not secure? Come to find out, the CISO they hire him from Wall Street. And guess what Wall Street care about the most? Integrity, right? They care about the money, making sure that things are original, making sure that things have not been changed, have not been altered. So this CISO prioritize all the resources on integrity, while the company that hired him wanted him to focus more on confidentiality. So it's important as you go in, you kind of do the security over the organization to prioritize this thing. It does not mean, right? It does not mean you're going to kind of skip one or the other. No, no, no. We want to do all of them. In fact, that's where the defense in depth comes in. Look, there's not a single concept or a single tool, a single thing that's going to secure everything, right? You are going to use multiple stuff to keep yourself secure. The same thing goes for the CIA. You want to integrate all of these elements. You want to use all of them at the same time, but prioritizing the things that really matters to your organization more than anything. If there is one word that I'm going to come back to over and over, it's going to be risk. Now, we even have a lesson, a module dedicated just to risk management, which I will come back to that and talk about this in more depth. But in this particular slide, I just want to introduce these to you, these terminologies, so you have them in the back of your mind as we go on and talk about the rest of this content. So what is risk? Well, risk is the probability for loss. But before I dig deep into risk, let's talk about these other kind of terminologies so that we can kind of build up our definitions. The first one is threat. What is threat? Well, threat is something that can mess you up. It could be like a threat agent. It could be a human. It could be a computer virus. It could be a God-made, something like a natural disaster, earthquake, tornadoes, you name it. All these things are threat. Right? Just remember, threat is something that can mess you up. It's something that mean you no good. It could be, like I said, a computer code, right? Like a malware, like a malicious software, right? That is designed to steal data from your environment. It could be a threat agent, like a human, right? Who is coming after you, who's coming to attack you. It could be an advanced, persistent threat, right? We're going to come back to this APT in chapter 2. Insider threat, natural disaster, nation states, you name it. All of these things, all of these are threats and threat actors. Remember, this is someone or something that has the resources, the capabilities, the means, the motivation to attack you. Usually, we are not in control of threats. If someone want to attack you, they will attack you. Often, most cybersecurity professionals, they make a mistake to kind of a focus on the threat. They try to stress over threats, and that's not good because threats are outside of our control. It's okay to do threat assessment, to kind of know who is the enemy, know who's out there that has the intentions to attack us, but it's not okay to lose sleep over it. The reason is that's outside of our control as security professionals. So the thing that's within our control is vulnerability. What is a vulnerability? Well, a vulnerability is a weakness. It's a flaw into a system, right? This is something that the threat can exploit. Often you will see, people or books, right, saying that a threat can exploit a vulnerability. What that means is you got to have a weakness. You got to have a flaw in your system, in your design of the network, in your policies for a threat to be able to cause that harm, to be able to harm you. So what could be a vulnerability? Well, a vulnerability could be unpatched system, a vulnerable system, or a system that's not up to date. It could be a 0-day, literally like a weakness that you don't even know it exists. Right? It could be those users that are not trained. All of these things are vulnerabilities. Here is the sweet spot. We are in charge of the vulnerability. Like I mentioned earlier, we're not in charge of the threat, but we are in charge of the vulnerability, which means we can control this. We can decide to patch the system. We can do some threat hunting and figure out what are the 0 days, what are some of the vulnerabilities that are here that we don't even know that they exist in the first place. We can train our users, right? The biggest problem is that most of cybersecurity professionals, they tend to focus on the things that they cannot control. We can control the vulnerabilities. We should always focus on the vulnerabilities. Let me tell you something. Most of the attacks that have happened in the past, they have used the vulnerabilities that were years old. Like literally, when these companies getting attacked, it's not because it's some kind of a zero that they didn't even know it exists. It's not a new vulnerability. It's not a new weakness. It's a weakness that have been being exploited for months, if not years, if not weeks. So therefore, we need to always keep our system up to date because that's what we can control. Now, exploit is just a technique. It could be a code, meaning a virus, a malware code that a threat can use to take advantage of the vulnerability. Like I mentioned, you will hear people saying, hey, a threat exploiting a vulnerability. What really that means is that they're using some kind of a technique, some kind of a code in order to attack you, in order to take advantage of these vulnerabilities. Now, back to that risk. A risk, like I mentioned earlier, is the probability for loss. It's the likelihood, right? It's something that haven't happened yet, right? If something is certain, right? If we know for sure this thing will happen or it's going to happen, it's not a risk. A risk is the probability, is the likelihood of a threat happening, all right, of someone attacking us. But for something to be classified as a risk, both a threat and a vulnerability have to exist. They both have to exist for something to be classified as a risk. So on that, if you were to Google this or on that exam, you will see where they said a risk equals threat times a vulnerability. What they're trying to tell you is that for something to be classified as a risk, a threat has to exist, a vulnerability has to exist, meaning we got to have the weaknesses, but also there has to be someone out there or something out there who can take advantage of those weaknesses, who can exploit those weaknesses. If both of these two things are there, then we have a risk. We have a probability, right? There's a likelihood of this thing happening to us. So, what we want to do in the real world is focus on the thing that we can. Focus on the vulnerability. Focus on the thing that's within our control. Like I said earlier, the threat is always there. So we want to focus on the vulnerability that has the highest impact. So once we do vulnerability assessment within our organization, we're gonna find the vulnerabilities that has the highest, the biggest impact to our organization, and then start fixing those vulnerabilities first. Not all vulnerabilities are created equal. And then we want to focus on the vulnerability that can cause the most harm to our organization. Now, continuing to this risk concept, you need to understand that security deals with managing risk. We are in the business of risk management. Like I mentioned earlier, if there's one word that I'm going to use with the highest frequency in this training, it's going to be risk and risk management. The reason is that's the business we're in. We are in the business of managing risk. So remember, risk is the probability for a threat crossing or touching the vulnerability, for a threat exploiting the vulnerability. Remember, threat is outside of our control, but we can control the vulnerability. And then when we're going in and trying to manage this vulnerability, trying to mitigate these vulnerabilities, we need to focus on the vulnerabilities that matter to our organization, the vulnerabilities with the highest impact. If there is a vulnerability, there's a weakness that's going to cause us a loss of $10 million. And there's another vulnerability that's going to cause us $1 million. Guess which one we're going to focus on first? This right here, right? Take care of that first. Right? There are even jobs, right? You can get hired and become like a vulnerability assessor or vulnerability management personnel who just on a day in and day out, your job is to deal with the vulnerability, is to deal with fixing vulnerabilities to the organization. So remember, it's impossible to mitigate all the vulnerability, all the risk, right? Your job is to constantly right? Track down, manage, mitigate, control these these vulnerabilities or this risk, I should say, the risk to the organization. So risk mitigation is really all about balancing the security with functionality. Remember, if something is super secure, that means it is useless. So our job is to manage the risk to the organization. And the way we do that is by balancing between functionality and security. Every time you add a functionality to your environment, every time you make something easy to use, you are reducing the security. This is one of the reasons why we're going to be hired for a very long time, because these systems must be available for the people to use them. If they're available, that means somebody can get to them. Some bad guys somewhere can get to them. And that's where we come in to stop these bad guys from getting into these systems. So you see a lot of things coming up with this AI. People are talking about, oh, artificial intelligence is taking everybody's jobs. Well, folks, I'm here to tell you, security is AI proof, right? It's a recession proof, it's AI proof, because even these AI systems, they need to be secure. They need to be protected, which is where we come in. Other terminologies that you need to be aware of that's going to be on that exam is non-repudiation and authenticity. Well, I will be coming back to authenticity in the little chapters once we start talking about the I quadruple A, right? Or I triple A, I quadruple A, right? This is the identification, authentication, authorization, and accounting. We will be coming back to this because this is one of those core concepts, right? Core concepts that you need to know when it comes to security. We need to authenticate people. We need the need to know, right? Really, the need to know. We need least privileges, right? Giving people only access they need to do their job and nothing less and nothing more. And for us to do that, we need to be able to identify them. We need to know to authenticate people. We need to know who they are for us to accomplish that. But authenticity is making sure that the data, the message, the identities are real. They are reliable. They have been tampered with. Nobody have messed around with this. Like, we can trust this thing that's coming to us. Like I said, for us to be able to do that is by knowing who that thing is coming from. So did that email really come from your boss? Right? Did that email really come from your boss? For us to be able, if we're not so sure, we might do something like digital signatures. Like digital signatures where we have the boss sign that email digitally. Now we can prove. Now we can be like, oh, okay, well, that really did come from my boss, right? Does that patch really come from Microsoft? Well, what can Microsoft do? Microsoft can sign the patch. Where we go in, we identify, we look at the integrity of the patch, we look at the hash of the patch, and then be able to kind of be sure that this patch did come from Microsoft. Another term or concept that's going to be on that exam that's very critical, it's non-repudiation. Non-repudiation, it's all about making sure that the person, the entity, the device, whatever that is, cannot deny sending a message or performing some kind of action, right? Or performing some kind of action. If you did send that message, we can prove you are the one who sent that message. You cannot go in and deny it because there is a proof. There's some kind of a timestamp. There's a way of us, right, proving you are the one that performed that action. See, in the real world, if you go into the bank and sign the bank, put your signature on the back of the check, or as you're going in and you try to deposit the check to the bank. Once you sign the check, deposit the check, you cannot repudiate that. You can't go back and be like, you know what? That's not my signature. the bank are going to tell you, look, hey, this is your signature. We can prove it because you did sign here, and this is your signature, and your signature is supposed to be unique to you. So in the digital world, what we normally use is digital signatures, where we are going in and authenticate you, identify who you are, authenticate you, and then have give you some kind of a digital identity, right? Where once you sign anything, once you sign that, or once that identity is tied to you, you cannot deny performing an action. Every time we see that particular thing, we'll know, okay, well, this is Francois, right? Once we talk about cryptography, this is going to come a little bit more clear, because in cryptography, we're going to talk about something like a private key, right? Like a private key. Once we see that private, every time we see that private key, we know it's you, because that identify you, that ties back to you. The same thing applies when you have, let's say, like an ID badge. When we set up our cryptographic in ID badge, and then we assign that ID badge to your name, your identities, we can prove you are who you say you are. And then we can kind of have that accountability. We can preventing you, the person, denying taking some kind of action. So non-repudiation is very important. It's all about making sure you cannot deny performing some kind of action. And it's pretty good because often people will do things and try to hide their identity, right? They'll perform some kind of action, and they might lie. Computers do that all the time. Computers can spoof other people's identity, where I am performing this action, but I am lying about it. I'm saying, oh, this is coming from me, and this is my IP address. In reality, it's not coming from that particular IP address. So non-repudiation goes in and take that out the window, and by saying, hey, look, we're going to authenticate you. And then for that reason, once we've already authenticated you, you cannot deny taking certain actions, right? So when someone digitally sign a document, something like a DocuSign, or when they digitally sign a document, that provides a proof of their identity. Therefore, they cannot come in and deny this. They cannot repudiate that action. Whatever they do, once they've already authenticated, we can prove they are who they say they are. When it comes to security, we have to recognize that there is not a single device or a single product, single measures that's going to stop all the threats from attacking your organization. Right? See, look, threats comes in different shapes and different sizes, really. We have internal threats, really, people working for you. We have external threats, right? People outside of your organization, things like a nation state, a country after you. We have script kiddies, those wannabe attackers. We have activists. You have these criminal syndicates, criminal gangs. All of these groups and these things are threats to your organization, and there's not a single product that can stop all of them from attacking you. Okay, here's the thing. What if I will tell you right now that I, Mr. Francois, have a magical box, like a box that can protect you from everything, right? If I tell you that, well, some of you will say, no, 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 Francois, stop lying to us. Well, that box does not exist. There's not a single box that can protect us from all external threats, from all the threats. Well, in fact, that box do exist. If we were to go to Google right now, if we go to Google and go to something like UTM, there's this thing known as UTM, Unified Threat Management Systems. There's one that's known as OPN Sense, UTM. Let me get here, right? So this is a unified threat management, which means it's a one single box that comes with a bunch of security capabilities, right? Scroll down a little bit here, you start seeing this. Oh, well, look at some of the features of this OPN. OPN, it's a free UTM. It's open source. You can download this and start playing with this. If you go to the download section here quickly, you can add this to your VirtualBox and start playing with it. So you go here to the architecture, you pick that, make sure AMD it's selected, and once you come here, pick a DVD, and then make sure you download the ISO. here. You can pick the location where you want to download this from, but make sure you download the ISO, then you can go to your VirtualBox and then install this on top of your VirtualBox. But if I go back to the features for just a second, look at this. This thing, this OPN, can work as a firewall. It does work as a multi-WAN, right? VPN, hardware failover for things like redundancies, SD-WAN, right? IDS, intrusion detection, intrusion and prevention systems, 2FA, two-factor authentication, routing protocols, web filtering, intuitive user interface, or interfaces, multi-language, on and on, next generation's firewalls, and captive portal, load balancer, net flow, monitoring, APIs, and much more. So do these boxes exist? Yes, they do. So what is the problem here, though? Well, the problem is there is not a single product that can secure your environment. Well, one, with a product like that one, there's the single point of a failure. Now, single point of a failure is the enemy of security. So if Mr. Francois here comes to you and tell you, hey, look, I have this magical box that can protect you from all these threats, I am probably lying to you. There is not a single product that's going to secure you from the entire, there's not a single product that's going to secure you from all threats. So what we do, we use what we normally call defense in depth. Defense in depth is the idea that we're going to use multiple things to secure your business. And when we're talking about defense in depth, we start thinking about security controls, categories, right? Categories are the big pictures. See, when it comes to security categories or security controls categories, these are very important because they go in and tell you different ways, multiple ways you can secure your organization instead of just relying on one method, relying on one measure to secure your environment. So imagine our computer, right, as a big house. Well, how would you secure that house? Well, some of you might say, okay, well, to keep this house secure, there are a few things I need to do. Well, first of all, I'll need to have multiple locks, right, to different doors within the house. Second, I might have some rules of who coming in, who's going out. Before you can come into the house, well, you need to knock on the door, and I need to know you are, I need to authenticate you, basic. I need to know you're one of the member of the house before I let you into the house. Well, I might even have daily habits of making sure before we go to bed that I check everything, making sure that all the doors are locked, making sure that everything is really, locked up. And then I might have fences, I might have walls, all kinds of stuff in order to keep this house secure, in order to secure this house. Well, that's the same thing with security categories. See, security categories are the big pictures. They're the big picture. We have functions. We have things that are a subset of these big pictures, but what we have is a couple of them. We have technical control. Like I said, this is the category. So when something is classified as a technical control, that means it's a control that is implemented with technology. Well, something like a firewall absolutely comes in mind. Encryption, group policy objectives, right? Intrusion prevention, intrusion detection systems, least privileges, only giving people access they need through group policy, only giving people access they need to do their job and nothing less and nothing more. Antivirus programs, all of these things are technical controls. Right? We try to stop things using technologies. When I was working for Virginia College, we had students, this Virginia College was a school. So we had students who will come to school earlier, and then they will use school computers to start playing games. That's before the class starts, of course. Well, one of the things that once we understood that, one of the things that we did was inside of a group policy. Group policy is a technology that's inside of Active Directory, AD. Active Directory, which is like a very critical technology within the Microsoft ecosystem, a very critical technology for you to learn. right? Majority of company use Active Directory. And then when you are securing, you're going to be securing Active Directory environment. So that's a pretty good technology to learn if you don't know that yet. So back to my story. Well, we just learned that these students will come in and they'll spend too much time in playing video games before the class starts. So one of the things that we did, we went to group policy, and then we restricted what time they can sign into the systems. So instead of signing in at 6 a.m., well, we restricted that they can only sign in at 9 a.m. when the class is about to start. So that was a technical control. It went in, tell the students, look, no. You cannot sign in at 6 a.m. You can only sign in at 9 a.m. Technical control. It's a control that's implemented with technology. Another control. See, just having a technical control is not enough. Remember the defense in depth concept, right? Using multiple things to protect you, using multiple layers of security to protect you. Another thing we can put in place to secure our environment, it will be managerial controls. And kind of relaying this back to that house and knowledge, this big house that you're trying to secure. In terms of a technical controls, well, we might have locks, door locks. All these things are like technical things. They're physical, but they're also technical things that we can put in place. Fences, all these things we can put them there to help us secure the organization, and then we can configure them technically. We can implement some kind of a technical security on these things, so that, for example, in the door lock, before you get into the house, you have to put in the number, you have to swipe your badge, all kinds of stuff, right? So another thing we have, it's managerial controls. Well, these are the policies. They set the direction, they set the rules, right? The direction of the businesses. So in the settings of the house, these will be the rules of the house. Okay, so you can only, right, come in if you are one of the family member, right? You can only have the house key if you are this type of a person. That's the managerial controls, right? Setting the rules of the game, or the rules of the house. In this case, the rules of our security. So in security, the way we set up the rules, we use policies. Policies are documents, piece of papers that we put in place, that we write up and tell everybody, hey, look, from now on, this is what we're going to be doing. Does everybody agrees, right? And then you read over that, you sign it, you said, hey, I agree. One of the classic policy most companies tend to have is 90 days password policy, right? Saying, hey, look, your password is going to expire every 90 days. That's a pretty good rule, right? So what happens is we're going to have a piece of paper that says that. We're going to say, hey, look, read over this, sign right here that after 90 days, you're going to change your password. Well, that's going to be the managerial control, that piece of paper, that document that they're going to read and sign. And then the one we have, it's operational controls. Well, these are the daily habits in the house, right? Going in and checking to see if things are locked, going in and checking, making sure everything is really, still protected. Pretty much everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. Well, in the security, back to that password policies, we can have a manager going in and then asking people, hey, have you changed your password? Well, 90 days is almost up. Are you changing your password? Hey, everybody, make sure you change your password tomorrow, because tomorrow is the last day to change your password. So that's operational controls. These are the controls we put in place on a day-to-day basis. Like they get enforced on daily basis. Right? Operational, when the company is running. These are the controls that gets enforced on daily basis. And then you have your physical controls. These are fences, guards, CCTV, bailouts, man trap, you name it. It's anything that you can look at, feel, touch, smell, right? It's a physical control, right? We will be coming back to all of these in this section as well. Later on, I have a section we're going to talk about physical security in more depth. But the reason why we have these here is to make sure that they're keeping your organization super secure. And there's not a single one of these that can secure you. For example, what if the intruder goes over the fence? Then what? Well, we want to make sure there's a door lock Right, we want to make sure that there's like a door, first of all, and there's a lock on the door, and that door is asking them to swipe their badge or scan their finger and something like that before they can get into the house or that building. And once they get into the building, then what? Right? We're going to need to make sure we have a multiple defenses, multiple things in place to secure the organization. The very first control we have here is the preventive control. Most people like to think that this is the most important control of them all. And it makes sense because this is cybersecurity. And in cybersecurity, we want to prevent. We want just to prevent everything from, coming in, all the bad guys from coming in. So we're going in, we're trying to prevent attacks from, happening, from being successful. These controls, preventative controls, are applied before the attack happens. So we go in, we configure that firewall. We added the access control list, the ACL, we put that in place, right? And the idea is to try to prevent the bad guy from coming in. So we might go ahead and do system hardening. Go ahead and patching that system, right? Configure set up some change management, security awareness training, where before you can make any changes, you have to request the change. Somebody have to approve the change, right? Going in and set up monthly or yearly awareness training to tell people, hey, look, you should not be clicking on these phishing emails and things along those lines. When we do all that stuff, we are trying to prevent bad things from happening before they happen. Here is the harsh truth, though. Any preventative measure, it's going to fail you, right? It's going to fail you. Although we put a lot of faith in these preventative measures, we need to understand, we need to make peace with, if they want to get in, if the bad guys are really, really persistent, they really want to get in, they will get in. So prevention is ideal, but detection is a must. Remember that, right? So you won't prevent 100% of everything. Let's say that you are preventing 80% of the bad things that are happening within your environment, which is a pretty good thing to do, by the way. Well, you need to know that the other 20%, the other 20% that managed to get in, we need to detect them. And once we detect them, we need to do something about it. So prevention is ideal, but detection is a must. We got to detect these bad things. But here's the thing, though. Detection without response is useless. There's a guy, Rob Joyce, which I introduced that guy to you already. He recently retired. I was looking at his LinkedIn, and he's recently talking about he was, retiring. I'm looking forward to see what he does next. Anyway, one of the things that he said was that whenever they do, pen testing for these government agencies, and then they tell these agencies, hey, look, you are vulnerable here, go ahead and fix this. So they went in, they detect better things, they detect weaknesses, they detect these vulnerabilities. They come back next year, those vulnerabilities are still there, which means they didn't do anything about these things. So that goes in and tell you that, look, you can detect all you want, but you want to make sure you want to go in and respond. You want to make sure you want to go in and apply the fix, or update those systems and configure that control to make sure that that 20% doesn't really get in. And even if it does get in, we can detect it as soon as we can and then respond to it as soon as we can. Remember, many organizations lack effective detection. They focus primarily on preventative. The type we have is deterrent. We're trying to deter someone. So remember, prevention and deterrent controls are different. Right? Most people, they're trying to use this interchangeably, right? Deterrent is try to discourage someone. Preventative is to try to prevent something from happening, right? So you got to understand, deterrent doesn't stop anybody, really. It's more of a psychologically discouraging them from attacking you. Think about it like a warning, like a signage, like like a signage that goes in and tell you, hey, be aware of the dog, right? Really, if you trespass, if you try to trespass, that's the word I was looking for. If you try to trespass to that yard, It's not like that warning sign is gonna move and then stop you, but it might discourage you though. It might deter you from wanting to trespass, right? So there's a lot of deterrent controls. In fact, in security, we do this quite a lot. In fact, some of this might help you big time. There was a case in there was a case uh, 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 in court. Some guy attacked this organization and they got in. They attacked the organization, they got in, and they did the damage. But because the organization didn't have a banner, like when you try to log in into these computers, because they didn't have a banner that says, "Hey, don't even think about signing in. Don't even try to do anything here. If you do that, we're gonna do this," right? Because they didn't have the banner there, the attacker got away free. Literally, he never get charged because of the warning, because of the banner. So this is important. Deterrent is important, right? To try to discourage someone, to try to tell them, hey, look, you are trespassing, right? You're trying to log in into the computer that you're not supposed to be logging in. So the idea of deterrent control is to try to discourage, right? Discourage malicious activity by having some kind of a banner that says, hey, look, don't try this. If you do this, here is the consequence. Here is the consequence, or be aware of the consequence. But if the attacker move forward with that, the deterrent control, it's not going to prevent anything. It's just there to discourage them psychologically, to give them that little warning. Hey, be aware of this if you do, if you do try to do what you're thinking about doing. Corrective control. Corrective control. Well, if something goes wrong, if you're under attack, well, corrective controls jumps into the action. They're like the emergency exits in your house, in the building, where people can run out, right? Get out if the house is on fire. So the idea of corrective control is to try to restore things into the normal operations, basically take things back to normal. We're trying to correct the fault. We're trying to kind of making sure we stop the bleed, we stop the attack from moving forward. So it's going in, it's reacting to an attack, and it takes some kind of a corrective action. So things like intrusion prevention systems absolutely comes to mind. It's going to prevent the attack from moving forward. So a user downloads a spyware, the IT technician runs a spyware program, try to correct the problem, right? That's a corrective control right there, right? Human usually are part of this corrective control. They're going in, they're fixing things. The idea again is to restore things into normal operations. So we might go in and look at the things that are in the backup to try to restore things from the backup if the attacker managed to do some kind of a damages. So we're going to come back to this once we talk about risk management, where we're going to talk about, okay, well, if somebody attack you, well, how do you get back up and running? How do you go back to normal states? This is actually, that's going to be part of the incident response process, right? Incident response, not risk management, really. And then we have our recovery or recovery controls. Well, recovery controls, they're designed to restore systems, operating systems to a normal state after the attack or after the system failure. We're going to restore things back to normal. See, corrective controls is going to immediately jump into action and try to stop the bleed, try to contain the problem, right? Making sure that it doesn't really move forward to other systems. And the recovery controls, we're going back, we're recovering things. We're recovering controls to try to kind of bring things back to normal state. The IT system goes in, the IT technician, excuse me, the IT technician goes in, re-image the system, try to recover that system after the system failure, after the attack. Or the IT system goes in and remove the infected computer from the system, from the network or the environment. Well, another control is a compensating control. Well, campus setting control acts as alternative, right? As alternative controls when the primary one is not there or it can't be used for some reason. And you will see this on that exam where they're going to ask you, hey, we're trying to implement this encryption or this type of a firewall, but the firewall is not ready. What can we do? Well, you're going to do something else. Or you can just not do anything. So that's something else you do is what we normally call a campus setting control, right? Campus setting control is an alternative. It's something that can compensate the primary control. If the primary control have some weaknesses, or if you just want to make it more robust, campus setting control is what we use. Imagine if multi-factor authentication, I know I haven't talked about this yet, but we will. Multi-factor authentication can be used if the password, if just using the password is not enough, we can use a multi-factor authentication where we send text messages to people, or we can use something like a Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator as we authenticating. And authenticating based on something, something. I will be coming back to all of that in one of these lessons. Video cameras are great as a detective controls, but security guards are better. So again, security guards will be that compensating controls because they do more than what video cameras will do when what CCTV will do. A security guard can compensating the CCTV, literally, or because they can watch, they can deter, they can discourage someone, they can prevent someone, right? On and on and on and on. So imagine if the door lock is broken and it cannot be fixed immediately. So what can you do in that case? Well, some of you are like, oh, you know what? Let's place a security guard in front of that, that door temporarily. That will be a compensating control. Remember, compensating controls are like backups plans when if the primary thing is not working or for some reason you can't use it or some reason the primary thing is not enough, you will put a compensating controls in place in order to keep your security going, in order to keep your environment protected. Directive control. Directive control provided the guidance. Think about these as the rules, the policies, right? That we establish, we put in place in order to provide the instructions, in order to basically provide the guidance that's needed, that's going to be guiding our kind of a security efforts. So think about security policies, standards, procedures, guidelines, you name it. All these are the directive controls. We're trying to set the direction, right, for our security. So training programs, it absolutely comes in mind because when you train people, you're giving them the tools, you're trying to patch their brain. I had a mentor who once said that, look, we can basically patch everything. We can patch operating systems, we can patch applications, but one of the thing that we cannot patch is a human brain. And when he said that, I'm like, that actually makes sense. And then I was like, you know what? Maybe we can patch the human brain by training them. Because remember, 94 all the attacks. When you look at the Verizon DBIR report, which I'm going to share with you, 74, not 94, 74% of all the attacks start with a human brain. Human brain. It starts with tricking the human, right? Getting the human into doing something. And the only fight we have against this is training our people, right? Often a lot of cybersecurity people, they end up doing some training for the organization, weekly, monthly, quarterly. It really doesn't matter. The thing is, you're gonna go and you're gonna train people, you're gonna try to patch their brain because that's the only solution we have to fight against things such as social engineering attacks, where they're trying to trick the human into doing some kind of action, which is it counts for 74% of all the attacks. 74% of all the attacks start with the human getting tricked. So the directive controls in terms of security awareness training programs really do help in that regard. So we're going in and we're setting the rules for the game. We're setting the rules for the game. That's part of that directive controls. They're guiding us. They're guiding the employees. Remember, these are the policies, right? They're guiding the organization on what to do, what to not do, and what we need to keep in mind in terms of security. Think about change management, right? Whenever people are going in and trying to apply a change, if we have a change management policies in place, they're going to have to follow the rules. You're going to have to follow that document on how to go by requesting the change, how to go by approving the change, and everything in between. There's this concept what's the name of it? If I can remember it. Got it. Shadow IT. Right? Shadow IT. All right, we're going in, we're shadowing the IT team. IT. There we go. That's a shadow IT. So imagine if you're a regular employee and you just want to use Adobe Acrobat, right? Adobe Reader, something like that. Well, if it's going to take a long time for the IT to get that installed in your computer, you might just want to go online and then download that program and start using it. Well, you're shadowing IT. You're doing what the IT people will normally do. But guess what? That's going to change something to the computer because you're installing something to the system. So we might not want you to do that. Right? We might not want you to shadow the IT team. So we're gonna ensure you go in, you request the change. The reason is because you're not IT. If you just go online and downloading stuff, what if you download something that have a virus? But the IT team will know to check and making sure that the thing that they're installing in your machine doesn't have any viruses. So one of the biggest thing, and I've mentioned this already, that you need to be aware of is that when it comes to all these controls, categories, and control types, you need to know that you cannot use one over the other, right? We have to use both of them at the same time. And that's known as a multi-layer security, also known as a defense in depth, where the idea is go in and implement a bunch of these controls to help protect your environment. Each control types play a unique role in protecting your environment. And then we need to have all of them so that we can create a comprehensive defense against the enemy, against the adversaries. One of the new concept that was added into the Security Plus 701 version is gap analysis, right? Performing a gap analysis to try to identify your weaknesses, to try to understand where you are and where you need to be or where you need to go. So the idea of a gap analysis is to identify the differences, right? The different gaps between your current security states and then your desired state. For you to be able to do that fully, you need to establish a baseline. A baseline is it's what's normal. It's like, okay, what's normal to your organization? And this is really important for you to be aware of, because whenever there's things like a 0 days vulnerabilities, right? 0 days attacks. Said, I don't know why it says that, but it's a 0 days, right? 0 days. So for you to be able to identify that thing that's not normal, that 0 day, you need to know how normal your systems were, which is part of that baseline, establishing a baseline so that whenever you do this analysis, this gap analysis, you will know, hey, this is not normal. Right? This is not how normally our systems will function. So what we normally do is part of the behavior-based analysis, which I'm going to come back to once we talk about EDR, intrusion. I say intrusion, but endpoint detection and response, EDR. Endpoint detection and response, also part of that XDR, right? Extended detection and response. So once we talk about that, I'll come back to this. As well, once we talk about IPS and IDS, literally, this is also part of that. It's known as a behavior-based, right? Heuristic-based detection. What we're doing, we're learning. This is, by the way, this is becoming very important in this age of AI, where there's a lot of automation that's taking place. We're learning the environment. We're learning what's normal to the environment so that whenever we see something that doesn't look normal, we can be able to identify that kind of stuff, right? So for example, the last 3 months, our system's been functioning at 50% capacity. For example, right? 50%, when everybody's working, it doesn't go up more than 50%. Well, imagine one day you go to work and then your systems are functioning at 90% capacity. Well, that's not normal, right? You're going to go in and be like, whoa, where are the gaps are, right? What is the difference here? right? What's making all these big difference? So again, we're going to establish a baseline and then identify the gaps, right? Identify the differences and then analyze the gaps, trying to figure out, okay, what exactly taking place here. Then you're going to develop the plan of action, you're going to implement the changes, and then you're going to reevaluate, adjust, assess, and then go back to get back to it again. Again, it's a gap analysis. We're trying to, kind of identify the differences. The benefit of doing this is that it's going to improve your security. Absolutely. Remember, guys, there are some vulnerabilities that you don't even know they exist. For you to be able to know is by doing this gap analysis. In fact, gap analysis is part of what we normally call proactive proactive approach to your security, meaning you're not waiting for them to attack you. You're going in, you're assessing your environment, you're trying to identify, okay, look, what is the difference here? Okay, what from now to a few days ago, what changed? What is the difference? And that's a good thing in terms of security because over the years, security have always been a reactive, where they attack us, we react to it. And so now that is changing, and which is part of that threat hunting. The idea is we're going in, we're hunting for these bad guys, we're identifying the differences, we're identifying the gaps so that we can improve our security. Yeah, it's pretty good for compliance as well, risk management, resource optimization, strategic planning. Again, we're trying to identify the difference, and that's important for our security. And that led me to this is zero trust section. Well, you are going to understand that trust is a vulnerability to a computer system. And that's not from me. This is from John, the creator of Zero Trust. And I remember last year, I went to a conference in Atlanta. I live in Atlanta, Georgia. I went to a conference for about 8 hours straight. People were talking about how their product is a zero trust product, how their application is a zero trust application. And I remember sitting there, I'm like, oh my God, right? This zero trust is a buzzword now, right? They just need to put this in front of their product and voila. Now their product is a zero trust product. There was this gentleman from a checkpoint. I probably shouldn't be mentioning, company names. But this gentleman got on stage and was like, "Oh, a firewall is a zero trust firewall now." I'm like, "Look, man, Checkpoint been around for about 20 years, right?" I don't understand how, this firewall all of a sudden now it's a zero trust kind of a firewall. But again, you cannot blame marketing people. They tell you what they want you to hear so you can, purchase their product. Anyway, zero trust is not a product, it's not an application, it's a philosophy. It's a philosophy, it's a strategy that assumes that whether you're inside or outside of the organization, we should not trust you by default, right? It's trust no one and always verify. Let's keep going and dig a little bit deeper. So, what the heck is it? What is this zero trust? Well, John Kindervag, I don't know if I'm saying his last name right. He deserves a lot of credit for basically pushing zero trust, for putting zero trust out there at the time where people didn't even know what this was, right? Like I said, Google was doing some of this back in 2009-ish when they get attacked by, China. It's an APT, Advanced Persistence Threat, but later was linked back to the, Chinese government. Anyway, Google got attacked. It wasn't just Google. This was it was known as Operation Aurora, which was an attack on a lot of these tech companies. Adobe was the victim, obviously Google, and a few other companies as well. So this was in 2009 going to 2010-ish. And then this guy named John was working for Forest as a researcher at Forest. And then he came up with this concept. It's known as a zero trust architecture. Then he said that trust is a vulnerability into a computer system. He said that computers often don't trust the outside, but once you're in, you're trusted by default. Once you're authenticated, you're trusted. And then he raised a bunch of a really important question that, look, when you take a look at incidents that have happened in the past of people like Edward Snowden, if you don't know, Edward Snowden is this a whistleblower guy who was working for the NSA who copy a lot of the secrets and blew them up and telling the world how the US was spying on its citizens, but also on its allies. I'm going to pause that story there because I'm going to talk about this story in a later sections. But the idea was that Snowden, after authenticating into these systems, he was trusted. He could have copied things, moved things around, and nobody knew. Nobody was keeping an eye on what these people were doing. So the idea of a zero trust is that even though you've authenticated, even though you're already into the system environment, we're not going to trust you. We're going to always verify what you're doing. Because here's the thing about attackers. Attackers, they love to blend in. They love to steal the credential of a legitimate user and then access the systems as that legitimate user. And that's not good. So zero trust became very popular due to things like, working from home, due to things where cloud computing and people are working from different locations. So John, this guy Dale, posted a video of John talking about zero trust on LinkedIn. And I remember sharing this. This is a while back. I think it's like 2 years ago now, where I shared that because it was a really good explanation of him going in and talking about this. And I think I have the video up. Let me go ahead and just put that up here for you. There we go. So you can see a little bit of it.
Let me talk about zero trust in the quickest I possibly can. So, what is zero trust? Well, trust is a human emotion that we've injected into digital systems for absolutely no reason. So, it turns out that trust in digital systems is a vulnerability. And it's a very dangerous vulnerability. In fact, it's the most dangerous vulnerability in the world because it's the only vuln that's also an exploit at the same time.
There we go. There we go. Straight from the horse's mouth, where he's telling you that he's the creator of zero trust, like I said. He's telling you that, look, trust is a human emotion that because we created computers that we injected into these computers. And therefore, computers should not be trusting anyone, either human or other computers, once they're into the environment. So let's take a step back a little bit because I just, went straight to the point of what zero trust was, but let's see how we got here. When you take a look at traditional networks and how the networks were designed, right, traditionally, you start seeing how back in the 90s, how the networks were designed for trusting everybody who gets in, but not trusting anyone who comes from the outside, right? And this was made very common by a worm that's known as a Morris worm that took place back in the 90s. This university student wrote a worm. His name is, I can't remember his first name, but his last name is Morris, which is what they call him, the Morris worm. Anyway, this gentleman released a worm. And if you don't know what a worm, it's a bed program that self-propagate, meaning if it gets into the computer, it's going to replicate itself. It's going to affect other machines that are connected on that same network. Anyway, in the 90s, the entire internet was a flat network, meaning everything was connected to everything else. So this worm got released, and then it literally infected the 60% of the computers at the time. This is how dangerous this thing was. Like 60% of all the computers at the time got infected with this worm. And then this gentleman named Bill Cheswick, who was working at the AT&T Bell Lab, released a piece of paper. He wrote a paper that was very influential at the time, known as the design of a secure internet gateway. And one of the things that he pointed out is the things that we're doing now. He said that the way the networks are designed, it's hard on the outside, but soft on the inside. Meaning, once a person or the bad guy gets into the inside, that's it. They're trusted, they can do whatever they want. So the question he was trying to ask was that, okay, what happens when someone gets inside of the network? Should they just do whatever they want, right? And you can see the in the 90s thinking like this it was revolutionary. Right? It was revolutionary. So what he said, what Bill said was that we would like the internal machines be protected, even if the invader breaks into the machines themselves, become root, meaning become the administrator, then or creates and runs the kernel, right? Runs the system that manages the computer. So that's really the idea behind zero trust. Zero trust is okay, once you get into the environment, we're going to keep an eye on you. We're going to keep an eye on you so that if you're a bad guy, right, you don't get to copy all the file like what Snowden did. We can get alerted right there then if you are behaving differently than what that account or that computer will normally behave, right? So as you can see, people were thinking about these things back in the days. And here I think about the Target attack. In 2014, Target got breached. And come to find out, the bad guys got into I think the attack started in 2013. Anyway, the attacker got into the AC system, HVAC system, meaning the vendor that provided the AC for the entire all the Target stores. The attacker gets into their system, they break into this AC vendor system, and then from that AC system, the attacker was able to get to the register of Target. Here's the bad problem, and here's how this is related to what we're talking about. That didn't happen to just one register and one AC. No, they were able to access all the registers in all the Target stores around the world, specifically in the US, because Target is a US company. Well, the question is, why was an HVAC system communicating with the register? And a better question is, why was that taking place not just in one store, but in all the stores throughout the US? And the answer is a flat network. These networks of the old days, they were designed with everybody communicating with everybody, everything talking to everything, which means if the attacker gets into one system, or if they manage to break into one thing, then they have access to everything else. And that's what zero trust is trying to avoid. It doesn't matter if you are supposed to be here or if you're some kind of a bad guy who happened to be here. Zero trust is saying that even if you're inside, we won't trust you by default. We're going in and we're verifying everything that you're doing. So it's that continuous authentication, asking, who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Right? That's really what zero trust is trying to accomplish. So the motto, again, zero trust is not a product. Zero trust is not an application. It's a paradigm shift, right? It's a philosophy, a strategy that emphasizes that trust should never be, implicit, and it should always be verified. We don't care the account you have. We're going in, we're treating all the traffic as hostile, right? We're continuously verifying who you are, where are you authenticating from, what computer are you using, what IP addresses are you authenticating with, on and on and on, as you're accessing resources on that network. So here's a few things that you need to remember for that exam when it comes to zero trust. One, I've said this probably like 10 times already. We trust nothing, we verify everything. That's the motto, that's the idea behind zero trust. But zero trust do provide what they normally call a secure zone. Secure zone, it's part of what we normally call a data plan, which is something I'm going to teach you in a minute here. Data plan, where we're constantly segmenting the environment, sort of like micro segmentation. We're constantly micro segmenting the environment, creating these secure zones that once you're accessing some kind of a location, well, we've trusted you to access that location. You stay there. Whenever you want to access something else, we go in and we're authenticating you again. So there's that continuous authentication. We're trying to say, whoa, hold on a minute. were you supposed to be accessing this, or do you normally access the things that you are accessing? So that's kind of the idea with this secure zone, and you're going to see that on that exam. But I will be coming back to the concept of the secure zone in more depth. Least privilege is at the core of a zero trust, right? Giving people or things access they need, nothing less, nothing more, right? Least privilege. Many times when people are using computers, oh my God, we just give them too much privilege. Like they have like permissions to a lot of things, like things that they should not be having access to in the first place. So zero trust model goes in and says, hold on a minute, man. You can only access things that you're allowed to access and nothing less and nothing more, right? Things that allow you to do your job, nothing less and nothing more, right? Again, that micro segmentation, and then again, that breach mentality, right? Assuming breach mentality, where we're going in and we're treating the network as if the attacker is already here. And this is not, I like this, not because it's part of that zero trust, but because this is backed up by some kind of industry data, this, assume breach mentality. When you read the research from Mandiant every year goes in and gives out a research. Let me see if I can bring it up on Google here. All right, Mandiant M trend. Google bought Mandiant, by the way. 2024. Let me see if I'll get that PDF. If I don't, I'll probably put this in a research section. Here we are, right? They have this thing known as dwell time. There we go. There we go. I think it came up here, right? So dwell time, number of days attacker is in your environment from compromise to detection, meaning how long does it take us to see or to how long does it take us to know that some attacker is in our environment, right? So once somebody gets into our computer system, how long does it take us for us to know that they're there, the dwell time? And the Mandiant goes in, many times it tells us days. Few years ago, it used to be months, literally months. But there we go. This is what I was looking for. The 2024 version of this research goes in and tells us 16 days back in 2022, and now it's down to 10 days. This is how long the bad guys are in our environment before we detect them, before we know that they're there in the first place. This is insane. Imagine 10 days somebody in your environment doing God knows what. All right. And this is real data. This is real data. This is based on a lot of data from a lot of companies. So if we go back to this a little bit, the idea here of assume breach is that we're going in, we're assuming that the network is already compromised, and then we're doing those threat hunting. We're trying to identify the bad guys, try to identify what we normally call it IOCs. Let me using the terminology that's going to be on that exam. IOCs, indicator of compromise, right? IP addresses that belongs to bad guys, domain names that belongs to the bad guys, hashing, right? Hashes that belongs to the bad guys. We're always hunting, constantly hunting for the bad guys as well. So zero trust model has that integrated within it. So again, zero trust is not a product. Zero trust is all about reducing the scope of a threat. With the microsegmentation, if they attack you here, well, at least they only have access to this, right? Nothing else as well, right? And then we're going to reinforcing company-wide access control policy. Zero trust is huge on access control, right? Authenticating and giving people access to certain things. Zero trust is like at the core. Access control is at the core of what zero trust is. Again, ensuring security is not just about keeping threats out, but also about managing them once they're in. Those 10 days of the bad guys in our environment before we know that they're there, it's insane. We want to reduce that to immediate. There's other resource here that goes in and talk about how long it takes them to actually steal stuff once they're in your environment. Sometimes it takes them hours. Not days, hours. They're in, they copy things, they move. Remember, before they attack you, they've already done their research. It's called OSINT, open source intelligence, or reconnaissance. They've done research, they know who you are, they know your weaknesses and all that good stuff. And they get there, they just grab things, then they run. So we want to make sure we stop that, and Zero Trust do help us with that as well. So here's the case study of Google, how Google approached Zero Trust. And this is what I was kind of mentioning, at the beginning. Google implemented what they normally call a Beyond Corp. Beyond Corp is Google's approach to Zero Trust. And they did this back in 2009 without really knowing what Zero Trust was at the time. And the reason it was because of that Operation Aurora. Operation Aurora was the APT. APT is Advanced Persistence Threat that's linked to China. They reported it. China, by the way, have done this quite a lot. I'm sorry if you're in China and you're watching this, you're like, what is he talking about? But for economic advantages, there's a lot of reports that came out saying how the Chinese advanced persistence threat, Chinese hacking groups go into these big tech companies and stealing intellectual properties and things like that. That's beyond this course, actually. It's not even part of this course. But anyway, Operation Aurora, it's this APT advanced persistent threat went in and started attacking a lot of these tech companies, Google being one of them. So what Google did was that, oh, hold on a minute. They sit down and rethink their security, their entire security. And then Beyond Corp was born. And here's what they came up with. They said they're going to remove trust from the network. Yeah, they noticed back in 2010-ish. This is when people start accessing networks using mobile phones and laptops and things like that. So they saw that the future of work is remote. People working from anywhere. People are in different parts of the world and accessing the resources. So they removed trust from the network. And they said, okay, it doesn't matter where you're authenticating from, we're going to securely identify that device. So we're going to look at things like IP address, where you're authenticating from, the MAC address that is associated with that computer, and so on and so forth. And if that looks different, we will it's gonna raise some red flags, and we will, take a look at that. All right. Securely identify the user with multi-factor authentication, MFA, and so on and so forth. Implementing inventory-based access controls, absolutely. End-to-end encryption, context-aware. Look, Zero Trust is really a fancy way of saying ABAC, something that we call ABAC, right? Attribute-based access control. In another word, it's really just about authenticating people, resources, subject, objects, and then continuously authenticating them. Right. Literally, at the end of the day, that's really what this is. And that's why ABAC is the attribute-based access control. We're going in, we're authenticating people based on all different attributes, based on different context as well. So Google pioneered this. They come up with the Beyond Corp without knowing that's what they were doing, without knowing that John at Forest was working on something that's similar to what Google was doing already. The other thing I should mention about this is that Google still now, 10 years later, 10 years, this is 2024, like 14 years later, they haven't accomplished Zero Trust. So Zero Trust is not something that you can completely, fully implement. Like I said, it's a philosophy, it's an idea, it's a strategy. It's something that you build on top of, and then you continuously keep doing. It's not something that you do and then done. No, it's not. President Biden also put a few executive order in place. So 2021, he went in, he said, yeah, we got to secure these federal agencies. So there was an executive order that he put in place to kind of requiring federal agencies to develop a plan to implement Zero Trust. And here is something that he did. He gave them a few months, like literally, He said by May, we need to make sure that not only you have the budget on how, not only you tell me what the budget is going to be on how you're going to implement zero trust, but also we want you to go in there and put in MFA. I'm sure the agencies were doing a lot of this already, but him going in and saying that they're putting this into an executive order, kind of it tells you the importance of this. But he gave him about a few months, which is really not normal for government. Governments usually move very, very slow. But he went and he said, by this time, we're requiring everybody to at least be doing multi-factor authentication by the end of year, 2024. And then after he did that, there was a lot of documents that came out from NIST, from CISA, from GSA, and a few other kind of agencies. They all came out. They put their guidance, if you will, of how they're going to implement zero trust or how zero trust should be implemented in government agencies, but also in private corporations as well. This is not going to be on that exam. The Operation Aurora and the zero trust, federal zero trust is not going to be on that exam. I just put this here so that you can see if you need additional reading or if you want to put this into practical, into real world perspective, you can see how this is being done. So here's what's going to be on that exam. The control plan, the data plan, and the monitoring plan. This is going to be absolutely on that exam. CompTIA, they really kind of, pick the things that normally people will not care about, and they just, ask questions on those things. Anyway, I say things people don't care about, but things that are not practical in the real world, right? Anyway, the control plan. The control plan is like the brain of zero trust. This is where all the decisions are made, right, in the control plan. It decides who gets access based on all kinds of factors, right? So just think of the control plan as the brain. Right? Yeah, I just want to start there. As the brain, this is where the big decisions are being made. So it is in charge of the policies, the adaptive identity, the scope reduction, the policy access controls, and things like that. So the control plans decides the access, but it does not enforce it. That's where the data plan comes in. The data plan is where all the action, all the enforcement actually takes place, right? And this is where the secure zones are, those micro segmentations that I was talking about. This is where it goes in and says, okay, the control plan decided this is what needs to be done. The data plan goes in and put that into action, right? Put it like enforced the policy in there as well. Now, the monitoring plan is just observing things, right? It's just monitoring, watching things, and then kind of reporting, hey, this has just happened, this has just happened, so on and so forth. So let's take a look at this in a little bit more depth. The control plan. Again, this is where the decisions are made. Right? This is where the decisions are made about who's accessing what resources is being accessed, is accessed by who, from where, what computer they're using as they're accessing this, what IP addresses, right? All those decisions are made into the control plan. So there's that adaptive identity where they're dynamically authenticating you. They're continuously authenticating you based on what you're accessing and how you're behaving. So there's that machine learning, right, and artificial intelligence kind of integrated into that as well. It's policy driven. Again, there's a bunch of rules that helps the control plan make those decisions. And again, it's in charge of reducing the scope, like I mentioned earlier, minimizing the impact. See, zero trust doesn't, it's not like the silver bullet where once you try to implement zero trust, nothing bad is going to happen. It's nothing like that. It's just that it tells you that, look, even after someone managed to get in, some bad guys managed to get in, we don't want to be too exposed. We want to minimize the kind of impact this threat will have as it's exploiting the vulnerability, right? And then there's the policy administrator where it's kind of managing and distributing the access policies. And there's that policy engine that evaluates each request and then kind of look at it and be like, okay, well, this is supposed to be happening. kind of making those decisions in real time as well. Then you have your data plan. Again, like I said, this is where all the decisions are actually being enforced. This is the actual point where the users, the entities, the resources that's all accessing each other. This is where the enforcement takes place. This is where the actual security happens. You got to remember this for your exam, guys. You got to remember this for your exam. For example, one of the questions that they might ask you is, well, in the control plan, what is taking place over there? And then you will see one of the answers as being secure zones. Absolutely. Right? Secure zones is what is taking place inside of that data plane. We're going in and we're creating these micro segmentation parts of the network, especially in the cloud, automatically. And we're dynamically changing these things around based on how people are authenticating and based on how people are behaving. It's not just for people, but a system as well. All right, based on how systems are also behaving, we're going in and we're doing some micro segmentation. We're going in and we're creating secure zones where we said, okay, you're here. Unless you're behaving differently, you're not going anywhere else. Based on how you're authenticated, you can only access these things, right? That kind of stuff. And then you have the policy enforcement point, where this is that point where the enforcement is actually taking place, right? It acts upon the decisions from that control plan, right? Where it's going in, it's allowing or denying things based on what the control plan said. So the policy enforcement point, you can think of that as the firewalls, the gateways, the network segmentations, the things that we actually put in place for the enforcement to take effect. And lastly, we have the monitoring plan. The goal of monitoring plan is to observe. CompTIA 701, the exam objective, it doesn't specifically call this one out. So it might not be on that exam specifically, but it's another one that is taking place inside of a zero trust. And the idea here, it's acting as a SIEM. You could have like a SIEM product that is actually doing this, where it's continuously observing things. It's continuously looking at the logs, all the activities that are taking place in systems, and then give us the insights of who's accessing what or what is taking place. The beauty of the monitoring plan, it's real time. Basically give you the feedback in real time, telling you, look, this thing that just happened. And the other thing within the monitoring plan, if we have a baseline that we have created, this is going to tell us once it sees an anomaly, it's going to tell us, oh, that does not look normal at all. This user just did something that they have never done for the past 3 months, for the past 90 days, right? That kind of stuff. So it's observing, it's keeping the eye on things, it's logging everything and keeping record and track of everything. It's alerting, it's notifying us, and so on and so forth. So to finalize this, I'm going to leave you with this. Remember, control plan decides what needs to happen. Data plan, put that into action. And then a monitoring plan watches it, observe it. Inside of that trust, that zero trust model, this is what is taking place.